while the candidates keep one eye on the contests ahead, they are looking back to two races and what to do with those two races. And one of them, of course, is Florida. Debbie, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for having me.
I know that you were excited that Charlie Crist and the Republicans of the state of Florida want every vote counted. We've always in the state of Florida believed in the concept of one person, one vote, count every vote. Is it going to happen?
God, you know, when Charlie Crist came on television this week, it just warmed my heart.
It had to.
How sincere he was in making sure that the Democratic voters in Florida had a right to be heard and that our delegation would be seated at the Democratic National Convention.
He cares.
Especially when it was the day after the Republican nomination was completely settled.
Yeah. So how do you do it in a way that doesn't damage the Democratic Party?
Well, I think it's extremely important that our delegation gets seated at the convention. I mean, that's number one. That has to happen, or we are going to damage our ability to win Florida and win the presidency. I think also, whatever delegation is seated has to reflect the popular will of Florida voters. I mean, Joe, as you know, as much as anyone, the nerves are still very raw in Florida after 8 years after the recount fiasco. We can't leave Florida voters with the impression that they'll never know when their vote will really count. So any delegation that's seated has to reflect the popular will of the voters. Now, they're talking about a mail-in ballot as a possibility. I don't favor that idea. I think we've never done that in Florida. That would be an experiment, and with stakes as high as these, that's an experiment that I think would exclude too many people and be too risky.
Isn't it? And there's the likelihood of people manipulating mail-in ballots. Florida doesn't have an experience. Oregon does, but it took them a while to perfect it. How in the world do you drop this on the most important race since the 2000 recount?
I don't think you can. I mean, you have what's being talked about is an election run by a mail-in ballot run by the party. The question is, would we be able to use the signature verification system that is only available to the state? You have a history of some absentee ballot fraud that we've tried very hard to correct, but the possibility of leaving the result in doubt and people not even being certain whether the outcome they can have confidence in, that would make things worse.
Okay, I guess, although a do-over, for some reason I just can't conceptualize an outcome here that somebody doesn't feel like there was political motivations or some voter doesn't feel left out or not counted.
Well, you see, Mika, the bottom line is that Florida voters, they didn't break the rules. I mean, when people keep talking about the rules of the rules, Florida voters followed the rules. The state law in Florida set the primary on January 29th. And Florida voters, Republicans and Democrats, went to the polls in record numbers. We had the largest turnout in primary history. So we've got to be thinking, what's paramount is to be thinking about the interests of the principle of one person, one vote, and what is best for ensuring that when someone goes to the polls, they can feel confident that their vote counts. And there is no place in the country that's more important than Florida.
Yeah, but I mean, it looks like Hillary Clinton could do well in Florida, so it's probably easy for you to say.
Well, I have no doubt that she would do well if the election were rerun. I happen to not favor rerunning the election, but in the event that there is a revote, it needs to be one that is the most inclusive as possible. And a mail-in ballot, look, poor communities are very transient. You have people who don't have reliable addresses in poorer communities. If we have the mail-in ballot, how are we going to reach those people? How are we going to ensure that they're not disenfranchised? It's very troublesome.
And of course, Florida, there's just not a state that has more people flooding through it. I always said when I try to explain to people what Florida's like demographically, it's just like a river that is constantly raging and people coming in, people going out. Finally, how do the Democrats stop John McCain from racking up all of these political points while they're kicking and scratching and clawing over the next 7 weeks between now and Pennsylvania? It's a real challenge, isn't it?
Well, that I'm not as concerned about, to be honest with you, because John McCain has lashed himself politically to George Bush, and George Bush continues to be deservedly so unpopular. His fortunes, essentially, everyone acknowledges, are tied to the war in Iraq and then the economy. Neither one of those things are going well, and I think that the voters are longing for a new direction. So whoever our nominee is on the Democratic side is going to be doing very, very well, I think, in Florida and in the rest of the country. I think John McCain is very fortunate right now that we're struggling here, but I don't think it's going to help him very much.
All right, Congresswoman, it's great to talk to you as always.
You too. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
I have endorsed Hillary because I think she would make the best president, and that's a long-standing personal friendship. I love Barack as well. I think he is an excellent candidate, so I don't think you can go wrong with any of the two of our Democratic candidates. But in my judgment, Hillary is certainly the best prepared to lead this nation, and Lord knows we're in a mess in this country.
We are in a mess in this country. You look at the situation overseas, you look at the economy. Every morning we get the reports from Wall Street, and it seems like there's more bad news coming in every day. But Chris Matthews was on earlier talking about how the national polls show John McCain and the two Democratic candidates tied, in effect. And he's worried that the Democratic Party is going to once again will really be its own worst enemies. Are you afraid that this primary process dragging out to Denver could end up helping Republicans in a year where they should lose by 10, 15 points if you look at all the indicators?
I'm absolutely worried that we're going to have a train wreck because of the Democratic Party dissing and stiff-arming Michigan and Florida. And the only way I know to get around all that is to do it over, have an honest and open election. In our particular case, it looks like it'll be a mail-in election, and then let the votes count where they are. That's the only way I know how to get out of this situation, that if left going all the way to Denver, and keeping Florida and Michigan out, I mean, that's going to be a train wreck of gargantuan proportions.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Okay.
How do you not seat Florida and Michigan, two of the most important swing states? And I know, Senator, it had to be heartwarming to you to see that Republicans in Florida,
They care.
they want all the votes counted, baby.
Yeah.
Count all the votes.
Count them up for Hillary.
Let's change the system in the future.
Yeah, good Lord, yes. I would love to have you come back on to talk about that, because it needs to be changed.
I filed a bill. Let's talk about it later.
Oh, I'd love to. Senator, thank you so much. And Amika thanks you for understanding the pain that she has to endure every day. So,
Thanks.
Senator Nelson, great talking to you.